He opened our eyes to a whole new world.
Welcome, y'all. Today, y'all are going to be watching me dance while listening to me talk about how systematic racism has suppressed your creativity. Huge shout out to DJ Khan Fu on SoundCloud for this mix. Put it out as a free download. I really fucking hope I don't get some copyright strike or something on it. So yeah, just check out the set before we get into it. This is basically a battle set. Alright, so let's start picking this apart, y'all. How has systematic racism suppressed your creativity? So I'm speaking specifically if you've grown up in a largely white area, because ideas about creativity in that type of community, which is where I grew up, are pretty fucking weird. Because here's the thing, y'all. As a kid, I was always told, oh, you're so creative. And I'm like, how am I creative? I can't draw a fucking house. I can't play piano. Like, how am I creative? And as I've begun to unpack that throughout my life, I've come to some pretty startling conclusions recently. Now, before I get further into it, I gotta give a huge shout out to Francina Simone. She's a dope YouTuber and author, and a lot of the videos she's put out have inspired this. I mean, there's also a ton of anti-racism educators who have inspired my mindset around this, but specifically what I'm going to talk about here, she was the one, her videos sent me down this rabbit hole that we are going to be exploring here. But the specific video that I'm going to be building on is her video called Ernest Hemingway, Myth of the Mediocre White Man. This video is fucking dope. If you listen to me but you don't follow her, and you don't listen to her, please go subscribe and support her content, because that shit's dope. She has a lot of stuff that's not racial justice stuff too. Like I think her video on like when you get your book for the first time, that shit got me, man. That shit cracked me up. So I'll link that. But specifically the video on Ernest Hemingway, it was dope. It was actually sponsored by PBS after PBS made a documentary about Ernest Hemingway. And they sponsored this video, and she more or less started picking apart the myth of Ernest Hemingway, specifically surrounding the white masculinity present in just how we treat him and how we treat other authors of that time. And so let me just tell y'all the little interaction we had that got me thinking about this. I complimented a video and said, I'm not really, I'm wondering how many of these toxic writer mindsets, such as locking yourself away from the world and other pieces of shitty advice, are related back to the myths surrounding the classics and how white masculinity played into that. As in response, she said the whole writing is torture thing is such a white male masculine seated idea. Art is creation, and yes, it can be painful, but only when you are creating from an empty well. Usually when you do write painful things, it's cathartic and flows. Creation is just transmutation. All the drink and let the whiskey loosen you up is just wild nonsense that most people shouldn't be perpetuating. It's just an aesthetic. So, yeah, she said it. But it sent me down this rabbit hole. It took me a while to make this video because I had to really kind of do some internal work to figure out how to really communicate all this and shit like that. But effectively, what it boils down to is that there's very specific ideas about creativity and what art forms white men are allowed to do without their masculinity being questioned. And so we're just going to dive into that. Let me give you all some examples. If I were to be a rock star or an electronic DJ, then that's cool, because I get positive masculine points for that, right? Now, let's note that both of those are art forms that have been effectively stolen from black folks. So there's that. And we're going to come back to that. But there's also the fact that dancing is questioned in terms of masculinity. Like, let's take a look at this. If you didn't know that I break, and you didn't know I do some hip-hop dance shit, and I said, I'm a dancer, I love dancing, it's one of my favorite things in the world, it's powerful and therapeutic, and I think everyone should love dancing, it's the dopest. A lot of people would be like, oh, so you're gay? Or, a lot of people would used to assume that I was LGBT plus because I love dancing. That's just kind of the way it looks. And you gotta wonder, in a system, in a society that's built to give white men the most power, why does this system also perpetuate these same people not being able to do all of the creative art forms they want to? Well, this kind of comes back to control. All of these systems, as violent as they are ultimately built around control. And what we see here, specifically with the stereotype of white people can't dance, in my opinion, this is a blatant attempt to further separate the white and black communities in America. So let me get further into this. And I'll also be bringing in more writing shit. If you're here for writing, don't worry, I'll be talking about writing. But specifically when it comes to dancing, let's take a look at how dancing is perceived in white culture versus black culture. Now, when I'm talking about black culture, I'm talking about it from an outside perspective, obviously, but I'm just kind of stating what I see and channeling a lot of ideas into this. So in white culture, honestly, if I'm at a party and it's largely white, it is very frustrating to try to get people to dance, because often what happens is I go out on the dance floor and I have fun and I do my thing, and then afterwards everyone is all like, oh, I'm not formally trained, I can't dance now, I don't know how to move to the music anymore. Jesus fucking Christ, y'all, just move to the fucking music. I don't give a shit. In fact, often at these parties I have to shout, move to the beat, bounce. Like, I will have to shout this in order to get people moving again, because they see dance as such a performative thing that you can only do if you are formally trained, instead of an act of self-expression and community and love, which is what I see in the black community with dancing. Now, just for clarification, I'm specifically thinking about not just my experiences with hip-hop, but also my experiences in college. Just at a few parties that were, largely black and shit like that, and just the difference in how dancing is approached in these communities. In black culture, no one gives a fuck if you know what you're doing. People just give a fuck if you're having fun, and you're smiling, being part of the community, and not being a douchebag generally. I mean, if you're in my position, it's also about not being a douchebag. But generally, it's an act of love. It's an act of community. And that's what I see as a white person in black culture when I am dancing and when I'm around other people that are dancing. It's just this shared celebration of no matter what the fuck life throws at you, just smiling and having fun and pushing through, because what else are you gonna fucking do? So why in white culture, so aside from the performative aspect, right, the other situations, there's two other situations I can think of where white people dance. The second one is when they are fucked up. It's acceptable to not know what you're doing if you're fucked up enough to not care. Now you gotta wonder, how does this play into the fact that there's alcohol conglomerates and all this other shit, but we're not gonna go this far down the rabbit hole, we're just going, but we're still going fuck. So, on another note, the other time that you see white folks dancing, this is the only time you see them dancing in mass as an act of community, as an act of coming together, an expression. The only time I have seen that is at rock shows and electronic shows, both genres stolen from black culture. Are we seeing a pattern here? Because I am. And now let's take this pattern a step further. Why would white people be told we can't dance? I mean, the system gives us this power. Why do we have this one stereotype about us that we can't dance? Why has this been so carefully constructed in our society for us to not feel comfortable expressing ourselves dancing if we don't know what we're doing, or if we're not fucked up, or whatever the fuck? Why is it so suppressed? And to me, there's kind of an obvious answer when I look at what dancing has done in my life. Because in my life, dancing has caused me to develop a deep love and appreciation and respect for black culture. And in doing that, I have become an anti-racist. And the system doesn't want white folks becoming, specifically white men, because it gives white men the most power. It does not want us becoming anti-racist. It doesn't want us using the loud-ass voices it's given us to speak out against this shit. And so how can they do that? How else can they manipulate us into not speaking out? Well, if they're suppressing what creative art forms we can do, so that we can only do ones that have been stolen from black folks, and we aren't able to learn to dance, which is an act of community in black culture. I feel like if white folks learn to dance as an act of community, a self-expression and love, and not give a fuck about the performative aspect, or if you're drunk, or if you're at a show, just fucking dance. I think a lot more folks could party together and come together and unite and actually fucking start healing as a country. I truly believe that if white folks can get over this weird fucking idea about dancing, that a lot more unity can be achieved. And this leads me to believe that this stereotype has been constructed to drive a wedge between the white and black communities in the US. I know I sound fucking crazy to some of y'all right now, but this is what I see when I look at this in my life. And so how does this relate back to writing? Because a lot of y'all are here about writing. There's some weird ideas about writing. There's some weird fucking creative ideas. I can't even stand most of the writing communities online, to be honest. Other amateur writers have so many strange, weird, unhealthy ideas about how to be creative, which are largely based on, like, famous authors like Hemingway and other folks, like, which means to be, an author, you need to drink alcohol, you need to write every single day, push through it, even when it's tough. Like, there's so many false ideas about this. Locking yourself away from the world. Like, how are you gonna write if you're gonna have fucking life experiences, y'all? What are you doing if you're locking yourself away from the world? Like, come on. And that these are related back to false ideas about creativity, because with the way that our culture suppresses white men being able to be creative in ways, because generally creative people are a lot more liberal and a lot more radicalized. Generally, creative folks are more willing to speak up on issues and shit like that. The system doesn't want that, y'all. It wants us to be silent. It wants our silence. And by learning to dance, I've learned to not be silent about this shit. And with writing, this has also allowed me to write really fucking easily. Like, I don't get writer's block. I know it sounds weird. I know it sounds like, like I'm just talking about how great I am at writing. I don't think I'm actually that fucking good at writing. I just don't get writer's block because I don't get bogged down in whatever bullshit could slow me down. I don't get bogged down in false ideas about creativity because I've been dancing for 12 fucking years. I was taught by black culture to be creative. It's funny, I made this video about creative confidence when I first started the channel, before I really started doing more anti-racism work. I didn't realize that in that video, what I really meant to say is the reason I have creative confidence, and the reason I know how my whole fucking creative process works and I can navigate this shit pretty easily, is because I was taught to be creative by a black art form and through black culture. Ultimately, that unlocked my creativity, because if you look at it, this is once again what I see from my perspective, looking into black history and just studying anti-racism and all this shit and kind of contextualizing all of this within hip-hop in my life and all this other stuff. The white supremacist system of systematic racism basically tried to take everything away from black and brown folks, especially black folks. And the only thing it could not take away is creativity and that raw power of human passion and expression. They couldn't take that shit away, and instead we got all the most beautiful art forms the world's seen that are in every fucking corner of the globe. Someone who I had on the channel recently put the idea in my head that you can almost view hip-hop as the second coming of the Harlem Renaissance in some ways, because of this music and art and dance all together, created from a very similar part of the same city in which people were being oppressed so fucking bad that they created some art that was so incredible that the whole world took notice, right? The whole fucking world took notice. And that culture, despite the fact that people like me have put them in that position and created these horrible fucking systems that seek to cause violence in their communities, despite that, I was welcomed into this community with open arms, and I was taught how to dance, I was taught how to express myself. I was taught how to be me. And that's something beautiful. But when you look at this from the bigger picture, when you look at this in terms of how, like, when you look at this from all these strange toxic writing mindsets, like the idea that you need to drink while writing, let's come back to Francina's comment. The idea about, like, drinking while writing and all that being an aesthetic. She's right. And you know what? It's an aesthetic in which a white man is allowed to be comfortable being emotional, right? If they're drinking, they're allowed to be emotional and express fucking feelings. But these all play into larger systems and falsehoods in how we think. And if you're new to anti-racism work, this might sound a little insane to you, I know, but you just gotta kind of bear with us on this. Bear with me on this one. Not knowing how to express yourself is the reason that when I look on, like, the writing subreddit and shit, most of it is people who don't know how to be creative. They don't know how to be critical of their own work while being confident in it. They just don't know how to approach this because our society, for them, has suppressed their creativity. In largely white communities, the ideas of creativity are so focused around perfection and performance, and creativity is not perfection. You could try to make it in perfection. This is why, as writers, we do multiple drafts. Like, my first drafts usually look like shit. That's fine. I don't get writer's block because I just accept that it's not going to be perfect the first time around. I accept that I'm going to have to try things. I accept that some things are not going to work. Like, if you look at that in my dancing, you'll see me trying different things. Some things work, some things don't. Pretty sure this one right here doesn't really work. I was fucking around with some concepts. Might be something cool there, but I couldn't figure out anything in that moment. Does that mean this entire concept requires throwing away? Fuck no. I'll probably find a cool way to use this shit down the line. I can't do that now. I also don't really have the strength to do the shit I want to, as we see right here, where I just nah. I tried though, right? You gotta try. You gotta take these risks. You gotta be creative. It's really weird when I talk to folks about, for example, writing more inclusively, and I hear the ideas of, like, oh, you're afraid to write all this, you're afraid to write that. It's like, no, dude, I'm not afraid to write this shit. I just am cautious. There's a long fucking history of people in my position of power using stories in ways that perpetuated harm. I just gotta be careful. I ain't gonna shy away from writing shit if the story requires it, but that also doesn't mean that I want to be writing about, like, some grim, dark, fucked up shit. The world's grim and dark enough, man. I'll write some shit about that. You can follow me on Instagram for that one. But, like, if we're just talking what I write in terms of my fiction, because my nonfiction is about the grim, dark, fucked up realities of the world and what we can do about it. But, in terms of fiction, we gotta live in a more positive mindset. And here I'm going to bring in one other thing from a different Francina Simone video, since we're just kind of getting further away from our ideas about creativity and how that's been suppressed by our systematically racist society, and how the stereotype of white people not being able to dance has been, in my opinion, engineered to drive a wedge between the white community and black community. Let's move on from that to just talk about woke culture real quick. Because there's another video of hers called Everybody's Traumatized, which also got me thinking more about this, because here's the thing, as you're hopefully starting to see, if you've made it this far in the video, thank you for that, by the way, these systems, obviously, they are built to create harm for black and brown folks, mostly, but these systems harm everyone. Like, if you look at the fact that creativity is great for mental health and powerful for mental health, and creativity is suppressed in our societies, especially if you're a white dude. And then let's also look at the suicide rates for men, not just white dudes, because now we're talking about masculinity as a whole. The idea of not being able to express feelings, of not being able to be vulnerable, about, not being able to just express yourself in general, perpetuates a system where people don't feel like they can reach out for help when they desperately fucking need it. And you can kind of see that if you just compare suicide rates between men and women. We're not going to unpack all that here, because that's just the whole fucking thing. I'm not up for that shit today. But yeah, these systems are designed in ways that harm everyone. They obviously are built to harm black and brown folks the most, but they do harm everyone, including white folks like me, people who benefit from this shit. It is wild how deep this system goes. And so let's talk about the fact that I'm not shouting into the microphone right now, that I'm kind of talking about this shit a bit more calmly than we often see when people discuss social justice shit, specifically people of my social identity discussing this shit, because there is a lot of anger at these systems. And don't get me wrong, I got that fucking anger too. But kind of building on what Francina was saying in the Everybody's Traumatized video, we need to live our lives. I mean, that's why I dance every day, right? Like, I have tried to push through to do the internal work to get to a point where I can talk about the shit without just being angry, where I can kind of come to terms with everything as it all fits together. For me, this has also involved a lot of like unpacking my Jewish heritage, as well as unpacking my whiteness, and kind of separating these things and just all this other shit. It's gonna look different for everyone. I'm not gonna go on and on about like my psychological state and the internal work I've done to show like that. But if you are only angry, specifically if you're also in a position of power in this system and you are also angry, I implore you, live your life, express yourself, do your shit, and do the internal work so that you can come back to this with something more productive than anger. That's why it took me a while to make this video. I had to work through a lot of shit so that I can talk about this without being just fucking angry as hell all the time, because this is some horrifyingly fucked up systems that want to make me complicit to its harm. But ultimately, we gotta do our own internal work when confronted with shit like this. Like, if you've been listening to me and this is making sense to you, and you want to become more creative by pushing past this, then study black culture, or specifically black history, and study anti-racism, and apply this shit to your own life. A book, I'll probably make a whole video just on this, but honestly, it's just such a great starting point for anti-racism, is called The Black Friend on Being a Better White Person by Frederick Joseph. Just really fantastic book that he shouldn't have had to write, but since he did, it's a very, very powerful book. I'll talk more about it in a different video when I have more time. But yeah, if we want to unlock our creativity, especially if you have some false ideas about writing, like, oh, I need to drink to write, or I need to lock myself away from the world all the time, or I have to write every day or else it becomes too overwhelming and painful to try again, or I have to push through even when writing is tough. Like, writing is tough, but that doesn't mean it should be painful. I implore all of y'all, if you feel this way, if this is your mindset, then start unpacking masculinity in your life. Start unpacking whiteness and, just racial justice in your life, whatever your perspective is. I mean, ultimately, I say this in every video, but let me just say it again, we can't rely on the people who are being attacked by these systems to fix these systems. That's just not how this shit works. We need to come to the table and just starting to unpack false ideas about creativity that you may have been taught by our racist-ass fucking society with some really frighteningly socially engineered bullshit that ultimately is there to cause harm. It is there to perpetuate violence. And by getting into this, not just will you unlock your creativity, not just will you get past the idea of writer's block and all these other weird ideas about writing that just aren't accurate to what creativity is, but you'll also learn to speak up about shit. Internal work is required, reading is required, time is required, love for yourself is required, because there's a lot of nonsense mixed up in this, a lot of self-hate when you start coming to it. But ultimately, we gotta live, we gotta speak up, and we gotta express ourselves. So I'm gonna let y'all watch the last bit of this dancing. Check out Francina Simone's videos because she is fucking dope. Buy her books because they are dope. And thank you for stopping by. If you want to help amplify what I talk about in these messages and shit, please feel free to like and subscribe. And drop a comment below, let me know what you think. But for now, y'all just dance and have a great fucking day. Peace.